I think you will find that a lot of stuff that I talk about, yeah, it sounds really strange. And it sounded really strange 4 or 5 years ago when we started doing it. And I will admit that a lot of the stuff I'm talking about is not stuff that I invented. My claim to invention is naming it, the horrible sort of negative name of anarchy. And I'm trying to work my way around that name a little bit, because when you talk to CEOs, anarchy is not a word you like to use. I remember talking, to some degree, the anarchy name has been inspired by Kent Beck, who called it extreme programming. And back when I was trying to be a consultant in programming and sort of trying to do some of that stuff, I learned very quickly you don't go to them and say, we're going to do extreme programming. They're already scared of programmers. Extreme programmers? Yeah, these are animals you don't want to hire. So, but it got popular. We came back and gave it a sort of bland name called Agile. So I'm sure there's another name coming one of these days if it actually catches on. But anarchy was a deliberately sort of controversial, in-your-face sort of name. Partly because the company I was working for at the time, we were in London. We were recruiting against Google. We were recruiting against banks who will pay twice as much for a programmer because they have to write in C++. And you're sort of trying to find the best and brightest to come join us. And a lot of the messages here were actually describing how he actually worked, and the anarchy sort of get him in the room. So it looks like it worked pretty well. We got some people in the room. So one of the things is, this actually is all very practical, pragmatic sort of approaches. These are things that I've experienced. And I'll try to distinguish things I think versus things I've experienced, but most of the things I talk about are things we've experienced and I have done. It starts out with a company called Forward, which was a little software development company that was actually into product space. They were doing Google advertising originally and then wound up doing browser plugins and e-commerce. They cornered the market in parrot cages in the UK. Just all sorts of weird things we wound up taking advantage of. And I kind of followed that up with some work at, right-click should work, at the Daily Mail, which is called the MailOnline, your online version. If you don't know this newspaper, it's the most popular newspaper in the world, online newspaper. If you want to know what Kim Kardashian is wearing today, this is where you go. It is absolutely tabloid news. But the interesting thing about this company was it was started in 1870 or 1880, something like that. So it's a really, really old company. It's run by Lord Rothermere, the fourth Lord Rothermere of his title. So think conservative. And it's been in this business a long, long time. And so bringing in something like this strange process I'm talking about to this sort of company sort of sets another point. Here's a startup called Forward. Here's a company that's been in business over 120 years. More recently, I'm actually working at in a California Silicon Valley startup called Outpace, and kind of bringing a lot of these same ideas to the table. There have been some presentations. In fact, there's one next door right now by a young lady that works for us in Outpace. You saw a presentation perhaps on yesterday morning about remote pairing. That's something coming out of this space as well. So these are practical experiences of these sort of companies. First thing to realize is Agile is basically a social change. As I try to do Agile transformations, programmer stuff is kind of like we get to write more code, it's kind of fun. We get to do other things, it's kind of fun. But for the rest of the organization, it can be a massive social change. And the problem is basically, if you get to it, C-level executives understand there's a social change coming. They get it. But all those middle managers, they don't. They're risk averse in general. It's very hard to get them to do that. And so the result is you get a lot of half-baked Agile projects going out there. You get into an Agile space, you try to do something, and you do something spectacular, and then it's not replicated. I mean, they try to kill it. Or somebody wakes up and says, no, we can't do that anymore. You have to almost get to the C-levels and make it happen. And understanding that's a social change in the first place. And it's sort of a little story around this stuff. It sort of motivates some of the things that are different about programmer anarchy. It's something I call story tyranny. And the sort of story goes like this. That you have a development organization, it's Agile. Things are driven by stories. Stories are really small. Priorities are set by the customer. And basically everything is about stories. Estimating and schedules and who's doing what. It's all about stories. It sounds like Agile nirvana. But as we were doing this with a more and more mature Agile organization, what we really discovered was the programmers felt like they were drones. They were subject to the whims of these customers sort of saying what they need to do. And with the customer not really understanding the complexity of what we're trying to accomplish. And so, one of the things we're trying to address with this different sort of organizational structure and thinking was that. And it's sort of captured very nicely by what I call a requirements hierarchy. This was inspired by one of my colleagues back in my ThoughtWorks days, quite a few years ago now, where you sort of talk about there's a requirements hierarchy. Stories kind of represent the fourth level. You can certainly drill down into stories into task. You might roll stories up into things you might call features or whatever, or projects, and then overall business initiatives. So you can take almost everything you're working on in an Agile environment and trace it back through this hierarchy, which turns out to be a huge advantage if you're doing SOX compliant stuff, because traceability is huge in SOX, and Agile kind of just nails it. But this is the level of interaction that Kent Beck talks about doing, and the Scrum guys talk about interacting with the customer at the story level. I tell you though, as I go in and consult in Agile, you see a lot of organizations that sort of micromanage it. All of a sudden now they're having stand-ups and talking about what task you're working on and why is this task not finished, and you're tracking these tasks and who's working on these tasks. I certainly found that at the Daily Mail when I arrived. But it turns out you're much more efficient, and this is what we were doing at Forward, by moving it up to this level. We want to interact with the customer at a feature level. What do you want to accomplish? And now get the hell out of our way. Because trust me, I know how to get this thing done the best. Don't need to sort of micromanage me, get out of that business. Tell me what you're trying to accomplish. I'll come and ask you questions when I need more information, but I know how to get the software out the door. And stop trying to micromanage me around that. That's a pretty radical change in the organization. It requires a lot of additional trust on behalf of your customers to make that happen. But that's one of our key differences. So in the Agile space, you basically have three major types of roles. I've been talking about Agile for, a long time now. And you sort of have different roles associated with these parts of the triangle. You can have things like project managers and iteration managers up at that point, and you sort of have the business guys, the customers, the BAs. And I put QA over here because QA basically is at the business level writing acceptance tests. Unit tests are done by the programmers, but the acceptance test is much more a story level thing, so I stick them over there. And then you have all these developers sitting here with lots of different titles, architects and DBAs and UX experts. And we did a pretty good job through the Agile years, basically sort of wiping all those titles out and replacing with one called developer. But those are sort of the roles we're kind of left over with as sort of if you're really top-notch Agile shop. So let's look at what the roles are in Anarchy. So you sort of have the customer, the project manager, the BA, the developer, and some sort of QA/testers. So in Anarchy, we have these roles, and we kill these others. And we'll go through why these get killed. In particular, one we kill that's sort of not on the list is this one. We kill the manager of the programmers. Yes, this is, hopefully I fit some of these radical ideas, sort of, yes, good. So this is very strange. So basically you're back to a triangle that only has 2 points in it, which is kind of interesting. So what happens to some of these roles? Well, you look at the QA role, and you look at what QA has to do now. I grew up in the environment where QA were guys who basically clicked on screens, or even before that, put decks and punch cards in to try to break your program. And because they weren't good enough to be programmers, you made them QA. I mean, that's how it was back in the 70s, and we went into the 80s. But you look at today, you look at the tools you have to be a good QA, and you see programming tools. You see Seleniums, you see Cucumbers, you see very complex architectures they have to test against, so you have to almost understand the architecture system. So you sort of say, okay, let's see this. They have to write code, and they have to understand architecture. What's the difference between you and a programmer? And some people just kind of wave their hands about, they think differently. No, I don't buy that. I think it's basically the same skills. So to some degree, you get over that. Plus the old idea of acceptance testing is kind of going away because that's a one-time shot as you get ready to deploy. But our systems are running in live environments with dependent services all over the place. You need to move to an active monitoring thing. You may use the same tools to build it, but you need to have a system that's being constantly tested itself live in production to see if things are still working or not. So the concept of sort of writing this test one time and then passing it over and saying, I can deploy it would be really safe, not anywhere true anymore at all, not for complex systems. So the QA kind of goes away in favor of just developers picking up their responsibility because it's the same skills. All right, so let's hit the, let's see, next one may be BA. Oh, good one. So here's the BA, right? The BA is the person that basically is going to tell the programmer what he needs to do. And if the programmer has a question, they'll answer it. That's what BAs do. But if you look at what they're really doing, they're listening to the customer, the real guy who knows, and repeating it. And when you ask them a question, they run off and ask that question and give you the answer. Okay, why are they there again? Well, the answer you'll hear from the BAs is, well, your domain is too complicated for programmers. You can't possibly understand accounting. It's like, dude, you want to swap jobs? You want to understand closure? I'll swap with you any day. You think your domain is more complicated than our world? No. We're perfectly capable of understanding your domain concepts. Explain them to us. Or we can't talk. For some reason, they feel we don't have communication skills. Whatever. We can talk. We like the social skills, okay? Smell, whatever it may be. Yes. But hey, you got the Big Bang Theory, you got Sheldon, we got role models out there. We're kind of accepted for who we are now. We don't have to hide anymore. So basically, you get rid of this guy because it's just playing that game of telephone. I mean, it doesn't really provide a lot of value. I want to know from the customer, what are you really trying to accomplish? I don't need this intermediary guy sitting between us. Let's talk to the real guys. So that's the BA kind of disappeared in our environment. All right, click will click. Thank you. All right, so let's go on. I think the next one is Iteration Manager. That's a time-established role that is completely made up by ThoughtWorks. There's a guy named Josh McKenzie. I think he was out of Canada. And for one of the early ThoughtWorks projects, ThoughtWorks wanted to put their own project manager in place to manage the Agile process. And the customer in this mind said, I have project managers, I don't need to hire your guy. And they went around a little bit, and Josh finally hit upon this, oh, it's not a project manager, he's an iteration manager. It's way different. Of course, it's not different. It's the same thing. But they just got another role in there. So you sort of recognize that role is kind of like there anyway. You get back to, okay, what happened to the manager? Where's that project manager going? Well, manager is kind of an overloaded term. I mean, these guys are supposed to do lots of different things. So you go back and tease out these things. In fact, one of the things I did at ThoughtWorks in my last days at ThoughtWorks was have a seminar about, let's sort of identify all the things a manager is supposed to do. And let's see if we can't find somebody else to do those sort of things. So if you go back to Kent Beck's original book about extreme programming, he doesn't have the concept of a manager in there. He has the concept of a clerk. This is the guy who keeps track of your stories. He calls him a clerk. Not an iteration manager or some other high-falutin title. He's a clerk, because that's all you're really doing. And he says it's not a very big job. So we got the clerk role. You also have leadership. You're supposed to be the leader if you're the manager. But are you really the natural leader of groups? I've certainly been in organizations where the guy who really understands what's going on and can really pull the team together is one of the developers, not necessarily the guy who designates the manager. So he's not necessarily the natural leader of a group either. Ambassador. This is a fancy term I like to put in place because this is the guy who can talk to other people. His job is to go talk to other people and understand what their needs are and negotiate the things you need from them. He's an ambassador. I like calling it an ambassador because he's not responsible for making decisions on behalf of the team. Ambassadors don't do that. They represent the team's interest. If you're empowered to go make some decisions as an ambassador by the team, but if something is outside of those parameters, you come back to the team and you discuss it. But you don't make decisions on behalf of the team. You don't commit to schedules on their behalf. You don't commit to technologies. You don't commit to dates. Don't do any of that stuff. He's an ambassador. And yeah, some people are better at that, going to customers and saying no and negotiating that stuff, but it's a role. Then you have sort of the concept of coaching. And I certainly grew up in IBM. I did 17 years in IBM in my early days. And managers were trained to be really good coaches. I'm the guy that can help you understand how to be a better programmer because I was a programmer myself, and that's how you promote an IBM. But in general, the manager is the guy you want to look to learn how to be a better closure programmer or introduce yourself to that technology. That's really not his expertise. It's not where he needs to spend his time. So you want to find somebody else playing that role. And finally, there's one other role that you kind of don't like, and well, it's concierge. So we talk about concierge. Concierge is the guy who works for you as a team and gets things you need. I need a new LAN adapter, concierge. I need a check deposit, concierge. I need another type of resource, concierge. He's there to service the team. He's working on your behalf. And by the way, most good managers play that role very nicely. It's almost management inversion. I'm there to work for your team. And we call that a concierge, different role. And finally, you got this power-hungry guy. That's not necessarily a role you'd like to have, but unfortunately, there are a lot of guys out there who like the ability to tell you what to do today. Or more importantly, you can't talk to him, you have to talk through me. Tell me your status, I will inform him of your status, he will then make the change. Because I want to stand in the middle of this conversation because it makes me important. And of course, that's, again, a role that doesn't be played. But you look at these things, you can sort of put a team together that has these roles being satisfied without having to put in place a manager. Or you can try to find a manager who can do all these things, especially all the green ones, and he's the best one in the group to do all the green ones. Good luck finding this guy. Write that job description, try to fill it. Very hard to do. So we got rid of that role as well in this environment. So that gets me down to basically there's two roles to my triangle. You either understand some domain stuff and need it done, or you are a developer that can make it happen. Those two roles survived. So that's what happened to the roles. Just how successful this is. Of course, being anarchists themselves, the four guys had their own website, not to trust the rest of the company to do their website. And one of the things they published was how frequently they're producing code and shipping it out. They just basically pulled the GitHub statistics live, put it on their own website. The arithmetic here, it's been a while since I did this arithmetic, but somewhere between, they're basically pushing something new to production every between 3 and 5 minutes, all the time, during a 40-hour work week. They got really, really fast. And to some degree, the reason this anarchy process came out was because they wanted to go faster. And so they started killing roles and killing permission systems and killing all sorts of other things in order to go faster. And propping these things up, like with DevOps and other operations tricks, to sort of make sure that they went faster safely. And it kind of evolved into this. And again, I just plant the name on it, anarchy, because that's what it kind of looks like. Some examples from Forward. We had a system that was written in a .NET technology. The old system was .NET. It was basically a system that was providing all the money for one of our major businesses. It was energy switching. In the UK, you can switch energy plans the same way you switch cell phone plans here. You can get a new energy company and get new electricity or natural gas from those other sources. So the existing system was .NET and SQL Server. And I got a business degree, and the business degree basically told us really with no uncertainty that, okay, try one new technology, a new project. Maybe try two if you're really feeling bold. But be really careful. Anything more than that, you will die. It's just too much risk. So we decided we need to rewrite this system, and we decided we'd rewrite it in Clojure, Ruby, C++, Node.js, and R. We would use MySQL and MongoDB and a whole new system for C and CSS. And it worked fine. This is what the programmers chose to do it in, and they delivered. In fact, the subsidiary has been sold, actually the company's been sold off by Forward. Everybody got a really, really nice payday out of that. It's massively successful. Again, business school says don't try this. Programmers turned loose, said this is what we want to do. Nobody was there to say no. It actually worked really, really well. Another example from that same project. We were running a Ruby calculation on trying to find the best energy plan. By law, literally by law, we have to provide the right energy plan for that customer in the order in which it makes sense for the customer, regardless of our personal profits associated with those choices. And we do that. But it involves actually understanding your energy history, what postal code you live in, because different plans and different providers have different rates in different parts of the country. Looking at all the rate plans for all the providers that we provide access to, whether we can make commissions or not. Putting all that data together, churning it out, coming out with the answer for you. We wrote that in Ruby. And it was it used to be scattered throughout the entire .NET structure. I mean, some was in the app server, some was in the web server, some was back in the database server, some was in some stored procedures associated with that. It was scattered to the four winds. We consolidated that in one place so we could actually make it work. And it was working. So what did the programmers do? They rewrote it in Clojure because, Clojure looks cool. Let's try Clojure. And it actually turned out to be a little smaller in Clojure, and it was like, hey, this is kind of nice. So what did they do then? They wrote it again in Clojure because, and now I understand Clojure. Let's do it again. Now, question. What manager in your right mind would let these guys take something, you're trying to rewrite the entire application, they wrote it in Ruby, it works, fine. They wrote it in Clojure, it works, okay, fine. They wrote it again in Clojure. It's like, give me a break, guys. We've got the whole thing to rewrite here. What are you doing? So the manager will let them do that. So what manager will let them do that? And hence, there's no managers. Now, it turned out to be an amazingly bright thing to do. We got hit by bad energy news in the UK. Basically, energy prices spiked and everybody was trying to change. The old .NET system, it started to fall over because it hadn't been stressed in like 2 years. So we started rerouting the traffic to this calculator. And it was like running on one virtual machine. We put it over the calculator and it just handled the traffic. We put more over there. We put 100% of the traffic on this other new calculation, one virtual machine. It handled everything smoothly. And in fact, we made a lot of money that way instead of crashing our system. So it's like, wow, programmers made a good call. I would personally have stopped them from doing this if I had the power. I didn't have the power. It's a good thing. Anarchy. Click tracking. The other thing we were making a lot of money on is Google Ads and tracking the Google Ads. The old system, again, Ruby-based. We had 32 different servers running about 40% utilization, tracking clicks. It's making us $300 profit a minute running this system. So what do the guys do? They want to rewrite it. You're like, seriously, dude? Rewrite it? Yeah, because we found this new language called Node. Let's try this out. So they try it out. Wow. Now it's only 22 servers. Utilization has dropped, and in particular, latency has dropped. And we get penalized for latency problems in Google Ads. So it turned out this was a win-win and win at every level. Again, anarchy in action. They have an idea, they want to try it, they try it out, works fine. So I think you're getting a sample for what happens when you turn programmers loose. Yes, they make mistakes, but if you think about it, with all those other positions I've eliminated, and you replace those guys with programmers, you can have actually half your programmers make mistakes, and you're still ahead of the game financially. And they don't make mistakes half the time. They make some mistakes, but not that much. So, these are the Agile best practices, listed out, and in good anarchy fashion, these are the ones that we actually use, which is almost none of them, for a lot of different reasons. Because our teams were co-located, the stand-ups, the story narratives, which is, big documents about stories, retrospectives, estimates, all this stuff kind of went away. We got into the thing that says we care about results. So the whole thing about who are you working with and what's your iteration plan and did you actually deliver the code, that's about a blame game. We don't play blame games. We're looking for making results. We don't mind people making mistakes as long as we're learning from them and learning from them quickly. Pairing mostly went away, but they paired when they needed to. Again, they can make that decision, but they're sitting next to each other. The whole thing about unit testing, acceptance testing, refactoring, and patterns all disappearing. Because frankly, we moved into microservices, which is a whole other story of our experiences in that space. Microservices, where we've had some sessions about that lately, but very, very cool technology. And it killed a lot of the processes that, frankly, these processes are designed to build and maintain balls of mud. If you don't building balls of mud, a lot of these things become unnecessary. And we wiped them out. Continuous integration, that kind of went away because we're doing continuous deployment. Who's time to integrate? Let's just deploy, see what happens. Fearless in that stuff. And when we make mistakes, we back it off. Again, very strange stuff. All right, but that was all a startup, which is all kind of nice. But what about a real environment? Not a startup environment where you get a chance to pick your programmers and all sorts of other things. So I left Forward, and a few months later, I was able to hook up with MailOnline. Again, a very conservative organization. I've said all these things already. But I basically was, okay, come in here and establish this software process you talk about in this company with this sort of conservative nature. How are you going to do that? So that was my challenge. So basically what we decided was, this is what I found. Delivery was about on 3 to 6 month focus items, so 3 to 6 months between delivery, which was actually very bad for this business because this business was able to turn out a new article within 20 minutes and get it online. I mean, the editorial process associated with this company is unbelievable. Within 20 minutes after I say I need an article, it's up there on the page. No article stays on the home page more than 6 hours before it gets pulled. We're talking about the most aggressive, agile, transforming publishing I've ever seen in my life. Stuck with this sort of software process, which is like we feel like we got to save those guys because they're doing such a heroic job on the publishing side. We had specialists, we had front-end guys, we had back-end guys, we had designers, and we had testers. They all sit in their own little groups. They pointed fingers at each other. We had scrum masters, all this sorts of stuff. We had stories. And literally, I was watching the stand-up meetings. It was like, this task right here, did you work on this task today? How long did it take you to finish it? They wrote all this stuff down. You're like, wow. I mean, how much time is being wasted just talking about it? I mean, 30-minute stand-ups, just going through task by task and who stands on that stuff. Not a happy place. What I wanted to create was, something we get a major feature out within a month. I wanted to create this concept of poly-skilled workers. I didn't want these specialists anymore. I want you to be competent in more than one thing. I want you to be able to take a problem at this, again, the feature level, and be able to say, this part's database, this part's front end, this part's got performance concerns. Know where your limits are, but certainly be able to look at the problem and carve it up yourself. Instead of, that's a front end problem, I can do this part, but you have to worry about the back end. I don't know how that works. Throw my hands up. We wanted the poly-skilled workers. We would have some experts, but the experts are going to float around. If I need expertise in this area today, that's where you're going to sit today. If you need it over here the next day, you'll sit over there. And basically try to put teams together of 5 to 8 people, make them sit together. We literally tore down the desk. We tore out all the desk and all the little credenzas associated with that, and put in literally tables that literally had no legs between them, that you could sit anywhere you wanted to. We put various workstations up. You had no assigned seat. Again, sort of trying to break the mindset there. So a lot of that changed. So I basically changed about everything I could in that environment. We killed the titles. They had lots of titles. In fact, they have almost more titles than people about things. And titles were just not appropriate. We changed their technology stack, although we did retrain them in new technology stacks. And again, we attacked the physical layout. We ripped out the desk and put in tables. I do kind of manage around this particular model. I mean, it's a lot of different names for it. I call it Master, Journeyman, Apprentice. If apprentice is kind of a 1 productivity, a journeyman, a guy who really understands what you're working on and has competence, it's a 2. And masters are anywhere from 5 to 10 times more productive. I mean, these are guys you really, really want to get on your team and find and sort of cultivate. In my experience, and I do this in quite a few places, generally you can probably take somebody who's apprentice level skill and in 2 to 6 months get them almost twice as productive with the right training and experiences, basically on the job training, if you focus on it. If they don't make the transition in 6 months, it's not happening. They probably should not be programmers. They like the conceptual skills. They like something else to make this happen. There's almost no telling how long it takes to become a master if you ever make it. And generally, a lot of people will jump off from journeyman, move into manager titles and other things, or call themselves architects, or whatever they may be, and never actually try to stay a programmer. But those sort of things can happen. 2 years is a pretty fast cycle. Never is a lot more likely. So we took a very people focus, because it's not about a process. It's not about naming these things or your artifacts. It is about a people process. So we took a very strong people focus around this. So we basically said, I have this hierarchy of masters, journeyman, apprentice that I can really apply against what I consider to be the key skills I care about. So these are the key technologies we identified that were important to the MailOnline. We wanted to keep the list down to maybe 10 to 12. If it got more than that, I wanted to rip something off. We had some platform stuff around iOS and Android because we need to work on those platforms. Databases, which meant SQL and non-SQL. Understand both of those because you need to make trade-offs between the two. Certainly big data. We had server-side JavaScript, which is basically Node. Java's on the list. I couldn't kill it. That's the first one that I killed was Java. I couldn't kill that one for some reason. Actually, we killed Ruby and replaced it with Clojure, which is an interesting story in itself. That's a side story. And some concept of software delivery, that you really understand clouds, you really understand agile processes, or you have some understanding of testing. Again, testing I wanted to kill as well, didn't win that argument. But you could take everybody and sort of say, these are the key skills, and what level do you stand on this scale? Are you a master, a guy who just really understands how to do things, or you're a journeyman, which meant competent? I can use this technology. I may not be the best in the world, but I use it. I don't screw things up. I can work all day and not do something really stupid. Apprentice, I do something stupid. So we actually went in there and put a new HR process in place. And I went to the HR department in this conservative company and said, I want to change the job titles. I want to change how you specify everything. What do you expect I'm going to get from a company like this? No way. They loved it. I was equally surprised. They loved it. Because they've been in a battle with programmers forever about, are you a senior associate programmer, are you a senior associate programmer, are you a junior programmer? Oh no, I'm one of these because look at all these criteria. I meet one of these, why am I getting paid like this guy? Endless arguments with these guys. They get to wash their hands with this new process. They're like, hey, please, throw me this briar patch. This is exactly what we want. They loved it. Again, I was equally surprised as you were. So we put this in place. We claimed a title, developer. A developer is somebody who's competent in one of our key technologies. Now, if I take Java off the list, I had a lot of developers who are no longer developers, which is why I probably stayed on the list so not everyone would quit. But it was like, that's coming off the list. They said, well, what happens to come off the list? Well, you got some time to get another thing on the list, but you better start worrying about it. In other words, they're motivated to be self-learning, which is a very key aspect of this. We have this role called graduate developer, which means I'm not yet competent in technology. Now, I don't know why I would ever hire one of these guys. I mean, even at a university, you should be at least competent in Java or something. So we put it in there anyway. It's free. I didn't really argue too much. Then you have a senior developer, which is a master in one of the key technologies. This is a very traditional structure. This is kind of what everybody, once you become a front-end developer, your career path is to become an expert front-end developer. That's your career path in most companies. But we decided we want something different. We wanted to create a concept called a systems developer, who basically was competent in anywhere from 5 to 7 of our key technologies. This is a poly-skilled guy. This is a guy who can give a problem to and walk away knowing it will be addressed. These guys are extremely valuable to the organization. These guys do not fit in traditional organizations. In fact, a lot of our recruiting success in the MailOnline business is because guys were like this and were not acknowledged by the organization. You can be poly-skilled in some of these organizations, be sitting in the front end department, have something in the back end you think is wrong, and they tell you to shut up, which is very demotivating and frustrating for you and not good for the organization. We treasured these guys. So we put these on the same pay code. You can either become an expert or you can become poly-skilled. We will pay you the same because we're motivated to create those guys. And we created one at the top just in case somebody ever gets there, saying if you're a master in 3 or more, we designate you as a master programmer. Wow, we didn't have any of those guys. They might actually now because they have some really strong people. But look at that focus. You have 2 career paths that you can go on. You go on the traditional career path. I'm going to be a front-end guy. I love front-end. I don't want to do anything except Java and JavaScript and HTML the rest of my life. If that's what you want to do, fine. Be there. But you also, this alternative says really understand the broader system. Become a guy who says, here's a problem. I want to solve the problem for the entire problem. I like to play with that idea. So we gave that new career path to them. Massive success with that. We did train them in how to work together because, again, they were used to sitting by themselves and pointing fingers. So we dragged them into basically some intensive object-oriented training. It was done off-site. It was a mixture of skills. There were QA people. There were Scrum masters. There were developers, all in the same group. Some guys were tech leads. It was optional that you could attend, but if you didn't attend, then you're going to be working in the old code base because the new code base is only going to be done in this new system. So it's up to you to decide you want to change titles and change career paths, but if you want to back off of that, fine. We had a guy who was a database guy who says, I'm a SQL expert. I want to be a SQL expert the rest of my life. I don't really want to take your training. I don't think I'll get anything out of it. I'll still be a database guy. We said, thank you. Stay that way. We did have people who quit. The QA goes through this stuff. Oh my God, this is what programming is about? Well, yeah, this is what the tools are you're supposed to be using or use like this. I don't understand. Well, maybe you want to go find another job. They would leave. We also had a lot of operations guys we put into the class. Some of the operations guys left because DevOps is coming, and it's cloud, and they're not gods anymore. So they left. So sort of the project approach, again, here's a whole bunch of developers, and there's a bunch of tables. We call them tables to reinforce the idea that everybody sits together. But they were basically teams, and you would have a couple of projects to start with, and they would end up at different points, and you would form new teams as necessary. You'd slide people around to other teams, so it was a very dynamic organization. When's the time for somebody to roll off project A? When the programmer decides it's time to roll off, because I'm not needed anymore, and I'm needed more in project B. Programmers can decide these things because they understand their skills. We as programmers know who the best database guy in our organization is. Maybe the managers know, maybe they don't. But it's let these guys sort of decide. Just tell them the priorities, and they will allocate their resources accordingly. This also worked very well at Forward. So how do we do it at MailOnline? Well, basically, we absorbed 20 new hires within a basically 2-month period. By April 15th, we already actually started delivering things with these new teams, organized in this fashion. Again, getting out of their way. And by September, we had actually replaced the front end completely. We'd taken 130,000 lines of Java code, killed it, and replaced it with 4,000 lines of Clojure and some Node.js monitoring in a microservice fashion. Two CTOs had tried to do this rewrite and basically died it in the process. Got fired for not being able to pull it off. This guy turned in and came in and did it and got the CTO turned this around and actually delivered this early. And when I talk about front-end site, the Daily Mail, 1 month last year, I think it was March last year, they delivered 3.2 petabytes over the internet to subscribers, not including video. We're talking about massive, massive amounts of data. We replaced that with 4,000 lines of Clojure that ran faster doing that job than the old stuff. Yes, we do use Akamai servers, so it's not all coming directly from our boxes, but yes, amazingly successful project. So they did a very nice job of that. So for the last year, I've been working with a startup, like I said, in California called Outpace. Some of my colleagues are here. So we're kind of doing a lot of stuff that you saw in the MailOnline with a few differences. One difference is we only have developers. We're not going to create all these other titles because everybody's hired in to be a developer. We tell them that up front. My title, developer. If you ever try to get a CTO, I would definitely shoot that guy. CTO, actually, in this sort of organization, if you call yourself a CTO, it's like a bullseye on your chest. You're claiming you're smarter than all the programmers that need technology? No. Yeah, you get yourself shot. We already talked about this in an earlier session yesterday. My colleagues over here talked about that. We have 4 different time zones. We got remote pairing. I still meet developers I've never seen face-to-face that we're working with. I don't see them face-to-face, but like once a quarter or once every 6 months, we get together in a common place. It's like, wow. And by the way, it's not that, I'm kind of not surprised by them. Their personalities are what I expected with. I know I worked with them. I know how they think. I mean, the surprises are sometimes they're really taller than I thought. They're really fatter than I thought. As they sort of said, sometimes they have to wear pants versus what they used to. But there's really no real surprises about this stuff other than how they look to some degree, which is I find really amazing. There's actually a strong community around that. There's sort of almost an assignment within the team about what needs to be worked on. They have their own sort of designated leadership and do the next stuff. We're using a lot of new technologies. A lot of these guys have never seen before. We're definitely doing Clojure. We're writing microservices. Most people have never been in this sort of flat self-organizing teams before. This is all new stuff for them. And they're doing it very, very well. So again, this sort of stuff. And by the way, recruiting, this is a footnote to all this stuff. Recruiting into an anarchical organization, or an organization that's really flat and has this sort of positive aspects, is extraordinarily easy. I mean, if you're a programmer and you're frustrated in your job, you're tired of your manager telling you to do stupid things, you're tired of the customer putting you in stupid technologies, this sort of organization is extremely attractive. And in London, we had people that were leaving banks, taking pay cuts from leaving banks, commuting an hour and a half to come work at MailOnline, each way, because of the quality of the work they had. And they don't regret that decision. So this is a very, very powerful recruiting. If you're trying to find some of the best and brightest people, fix your processes. Empower your people. Get this stuff working. So this is the story of Programmer Anarchy. And I actually do have a cheesy logo that I used to put on T-shirts, if you haven't seen it. Like, power to the programmers. And that's the story. So hopefully I got a little bit of time for questions or challenges, and hopefully I made some people surprised.